Ready?
We're live.
Okay, it says we're still in a practice session, is that okay?
Oh, hi everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
I have to start the webinar. If you're ready, let me know.
We're ready.
Alright, starting
Recording in progress.
Perfect.
I still see the slide up though. There you are. We see you.
Great. Welcome everybody to the work session of Tuesday, July 12th. A little late. Can I have a motion to open the work session, please?
I move to open the work session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just a reminder before we start the work session, because we've gotten emails, a work session, again, is a time for the town board, we do it publicly because there's something called opens meetings law, to discuss issues that come before us. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to take actions on them, it doesn't necessarily mean what's presented before us, we're going to take action on it in the form in which it's presented. It's the occasion for us. Many times we're looking at something for the first time, but it's a time for us to really just talk about it and do exactly what it says. The title of our meeting is, it's a work session. What is then presented at a public meeting is a little more definitive. So I just wanted to remind the public of what the purpose of a work session is. All right, do you wanna take it away? You want me to
Sure.
start?
So the first thing on our agenda is an update on the proposed RFP for the community outreach and engagement. If the board recalled, they charged Sabrina with well, actually she volunteered, so let's put this on her. Sabrina graciously volunteered to take and draft an RFP for community outreach and engagement. And in the course of doing her research, she came upon some really interesting information that she wanted to share with the board because it sort of changes the context of the services we think we may be looking for. Sabrina, can I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Good evening, board. How is everyone?
Good evening.
Hi, Sabrina.
Hello.
So, as I undertook my research regarding charrettes, there is a National Charrette Institute out of the University of Michigan. I spoke with the director at length regarding what a charrette is, what their recommended structure of a charrette is, and then I also spoke with Tiffany Zazula, who's the deputy director of the Pace Land Use Law Center, who excels in facilitation and mediation, particularly in Westchester, and working with consultant teams with municipalities to come to decision making. A charrette process is really a three-phased approach to coming to agreement on difficult public policy matters. When the last time we discussed this, there was an interest to explore disposition of public lands in Chappaqua Hamlet. So in looking at that as the reason to hold a charrette, what does that mean? What I've learned is that there's really three phases. There's a phase one, which is really a pre-designed charrette preparation phase, where you really look to identify who is going to lead this charge. It's an executive committee. It's not just the town board, right? It's members of the town board, it's members in the community, stakeholders who have a vested interest in coming to agreement on an outcome of, for example, the highest and best use to meet the community's needs at the train station. So the phase one of a charrette is really anywhere from 3 to 9 months, and the intention is to identify the people, identify the resources, the data, and the location to hold a charrette. The meat of the process is the actual charrette period, and there's different types of charrettes. What I think the town would be looking for is what's called an integrated charrette, where you have a design component attached to it. This middle part, the phase two, it can last anywhere from 3 to 7 days. It is an intense cycle of inputs, feedbacks, and response. Okay, and the National Charrette Institute recommends that there be at least 2 to 3 feedback loops in a charrette process. In phase one, you identify who your stakeholders are, And when we start talking about stakeholders, who are we really talking about? Talking about commuters who use the train station, neighbors to the train station, people who live downtown, Bell School, the Chapel Central School District, you can name them. Our job would be to name these stakeholders who would be willing to come to a table and talk about their perspectives regarding changes to land use on town property in the Chapel Hamlet. And so the intention would be this week of meetings and feedback is not that all stakeholders need to be involved every minute of every day during that 3 to 5 to 7 day process. Rather, there's specific time periods where stakeholders meet and receive and provide feedback and review what's been prepared in return. And then there are open houses where the general public would come and comment and offer their inputs. And so this is an intensive week where the consultant group or the charrette professionals would work with the community, interview the community, and come up with approaches to or solutions to the different interests they're hearing regarding development on public lands. The last part of a charrette process is implementing or having a willingness to implement what everyone agrees on. And that can take any length of months, years, days. But the intention is when you start a charrette process, you have to be willing to implement a solution that comes out of that charrette process. I don't know, Lisa, Jill, do you want me to elaborate on any one of those points?
I don't need you to. Does anyone else need more elaboration?
Lisa and I had the benefit of hearing this earlier today, so it's fresh in our minds, but we do appreciate the fact that this is new to the board, and it's a little bit of a different orientation than I think the board and we contemplated when we initially asked Sabrina to take and draft the RFP. So if this is the path that the board thinks it would like to proceed with, then Sabrina will take and continue her drafting of the RFP, but with the understanding that this is the process that we're seeking to utilize for the town going forward.
I do have a question on phase one. Sabrina, to me there's a big difference, somewhat of a difference between 3 and 9 months. So what are the factors that affect that?
The factors that affect that is really during that first phase, the charrette folks would be conducting assessments, right? And those assessments are based on information. We have a lot of information, given the technical data that we've gleaned from our infrastructure and streetscape project, some of the analysis that was done regarding traffic in the downtown. So having all of that data will help us shorten that length of time. In addition, it's really identifying the stakeholders, obtaining commitment from the different stakeholders that they're willing to come to the table and talk and not disrupt or derail the conversation, but contribute to the conversation and voice their concerns and be willing to come to agreement.
Would you say that the
So that's the
stakeholders?
difference.
Would you say that the stakeholders would mirror pretty much what you termed as the interested agencies in the form-based code process? I mean, that's what I think of when I think of stakeholders.
Yeah,
I think of like merchants too and residents.
We could add to that, but
There's a difference. I mean, I interested agencies. I wouldn't label them interested agencies.
no, I wouldn't call them that, but the point is that we've identified community stakeholders in the past and, in different contexts, not even just on the town board, so I can't imagine that would take months to identify. I think we could sit in 1 hour and list them.
I actually think that we are sitting in a very good position to take that 3 to 9 month process and make it more like a, maximum 3 month process, if that.
That's what it seems to me, not knowing anything other than what I've just heard.
Yeah, in 2 hours, we could probably identify every single stakeholder.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then the charrette group would conduct interviews and, kind of do their assessment of our situation. And we have a lot of information that they can use to fill out those assessments. So again, I don't think we need to wait 9 months to conduct a charrette. I think we could do it within 3 months, even less, if, depending on, how we move forward.
So one question, Sabrina, in that pre-design charrette preparation phase, what is the kind of the question presented, if you will? In other words, what is the sort of the ask? How does that get formulated, I guess?
You guys are formulating that
Okay,
ask.
right.
Right? I mean, so what I've gleaned from your ask to date is I have a defined geographic boundary. I have a comprehensive plan that has policies in it, and that's about it.
What geographic boundary are you pursuing, Sabrina?
Town land in the Chapel Hamlet, town-owned property in the Chapel Hamlet.
I think an important, did you have an idea of cost? Did they explain that to you or share that with you, possible scenarios?
I did ask what an exercise like this costs, and the average range I was told was between 150,000 and 250,000, and I think a lot of that depends on the how much information you already have, the length of process you're looking at, how entrenched your stakeholders may be.
So I think a big question for the board is there has to be a willingness, whether or not it happens or not. If we're examining the parking lot, does the town board have the courage? You said the willingness to implement was one of the pieces of this process.
Yes.
And it's maybe not be popular, but for example, our our parking lot for the train station is always controversial. I'm sure we will not be the first, and well, let me rephrase that, we're certainly not the first, and probably many boards ago were not the first to address this issue. But there needs to be a willingness to take that aggressive, if you will, stand that may be something that needs to change. And the concern I have is it may not be popular, number one. And number two, right now, timing wise, just thinking out loud, that parking lot is probably still close to the at least it's been used in generations, or at least decades. And while we shouldn't rush any process just because of that, in a year or two from now, or in the next town board, as we go through this rezoning process, ultimately takes that step to say, you know what, you want all these things, town, but it doesn't work that way unless we use public property for parking, whatever it may be, that we're gonna be looking at a time when commuters hopefully are using that parking lot in full, and the time and energy and expense is gonna be that much greater. So it's a real interesting balancing point, and I think before we spend money on this process, we all have to, I would hope to say that we are willing to consider putting parking structures in town on our public land and rezoning, knowing full well that a permissive referendum can challenge that, because if we're not willing to consider that, then this is a waste of time and money. We're not willing to consider putting parking structures or using something on our public parking facilities to make it more accommodating, then this is a waste of time and energy,
I totally disagree.
okay?
The reason why is I think you said even if it's unpopular, the point of doing this is to bring the whole community together to reach consensus as to what we may wanna do. So if you take that to its logical conclusion, there will never be something that's wholly unpopular that the town board would adopt, because you've now got community consensus. If there is something that nobody in the town wants, I would not say the town board needs to be brave enough to do it. That's not the point of this charrette and what we're trying to do. And Sabrina, when you said we need to be ready to implement it, no, we don't. I thought what you were saying before is we need to be ready to hear what the public says. So in other words, if we on this board think 100% we need a parking structure and the public overwhelmingly says no, we don't, we have to be ready to listen to the public, not necessarily to implement what the public is saying. If we're not ready to do that, but we need to be ready to hear what the public is saying.
So it's kind of a mix, that, let's say Jeremy is gung ho on building a parking structure, and Lisa, you are not. You both need to be willing to come to the table, respecting each other's differences, and hear what the other stakeholders have to say.
Right.
And there's two types of stakeholders, if you will. There's those that are intimately affected by proximity or impact. And then there's the general public, right? And so there's two different educational opportunities for stakeholders to input information and opinion, and general public to input information and opinion. But
Right,
yeah,
cause like a commuter is gonna have a different view than someone who never commutes, who lives completely on the other side of town.
Exactly, but everyone's inputs are important. But the decision maker going into the process has to be willing to live with the end product.
Right.
So let me
Yeah, I
just
think, finish your.
Yeah, let me just clarify, so to be clear, I'm not gung ho for a parking structure, that's not,
No,
misstate
I
that,
don't
but
want
my
to
point of that statement was, and a couple things is, popular opinion is popular opinion, it's not always, Congress, state government, it doesn't always control, you have elected officials to make the decisions, and certainly it's a piece and a large piece of it. And sometimes we collectively don't see the value of something in the moment, and you see the value of it later on. So when we think of whatever it may be, I don't know what analogy you use for, like a rolling rink, I'm totally making things up, and you'll need to accommodate parking, there has to be a recognition that, it can't exist without access to parking, and that's one of our biggest hurdles we have in our community. So I think we have to be practical and understand that when we do this, it can't just be what popular opinion is in the moment, and it is about building consensus and it is about compromise, but sometimes people don't understand, one of your best efforts, understanding the full practicality of what certain changes will do to the community and the cost and the time and what they may be. So we have to be willing to understand that it may not seem popular, but to get what they want and to bring that to fruition, we're gonna have to make hard decisions, and very well that may involve.
I think we're
So
stating the
can I
obvious
weigh in?
here,
So I say that in advance, if there's not a willingness to say we may have to take that step, even if it's not a popular one, I think it's a waste of time and money. That's
So
my
can I
level of-
respond?
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying and what Sabrina's saying is that we should just do our jobs. And so I'm committed to doing my job. I'm not committed to a predetermined outcome. I'm not committed to saying we need this or want this and therefore we're gonna get it. I think that's what happened in the past, and I think it was a flawed process. I think what we should do is engage in this process if we think it makes sense, if the cost and the organization are the right one, and we should obviously in the RFP process think about that. And then move forward and build consensus and do the job that we should be doing, which is making sure that we address what the broader community wants and find out what that is in a real fulsome way. So to the extent that that's what is sort of a way to paraphrase what you're all saying, I'm fully on board.
And part of the process is to Jeremy's point, is not just saying, well, what do you want? Okay, I want, for your example, I want a roller rink in the middle of town. And I gave this example before when I was talking to Sabrina. It's sort of like our wireless master plan survey that we're doing right now. Everyone wants improved wireless service in town. Great, we can give you that wireless service if we put up cell towers. So what, are you willing, residents, to accept in order to get what you want? And that's part of the charrette process too, to say, okay, you want a roller rink in the middle of town. Okay, so in order to get that roller rink, we would need to do X, Y, and Z. Are you comfortable with doing those things, and what is your appetite for those? And if you don't have the appetite for the costs of that, not monetary costs, but the resultant costs, then what are you comfortable with and what are you willing to accept? And that's how you get to that consensus. And it's not just here, draw a pretty picture of what you want, and can we get you what you want in a way that makes everybody comfortable, or at least in a way that we can reach compromise that makes sense for the town. That's how I see it.
So, no, if I may, everything I've heard so far, I would have thought would have been understood. We're saying that we should listen to residents and be ready to take input. Well, naturally, we're saying we should have the courage to to follow through on what we're setting out to do. Well, of course we would. I can't imagine that we would want to do any of this and then say, well, we're afraid of public opinion. We know we take feedback. We listen to different opinions in the community, and then we weigh in on what we think is reasonable, and that's what an elected representative does.
Right,
And-
it's not
and-
just
and
following
so-
public opinion, it's sometimes making those hard
Well,
decisions.
I think that we're all aware of that.
Okay.
So
I'm
I
happy
mean,
to
I
hear that.
think that is, again, it's stating the obvious. I didn't think
That's
that
pretty clear. Okay.
that would have to be
So I
a major point here.
I apologize.
didn't
I
mean to be.
yeah,
I agree with
I
you.
didn't mean to lead the board astray. The reason why we brought this back to the board is because the process of 6 to 9 months, the process of the charrettes being multiple days and the commitments of the stakeholders and the town board of being multiple full day events was not something that we were necessarily aware of when Sabrina started the RFP process.
Actually, I was aware of that because I had gone to the National Charrette Institute website,
Okay,
and
well then,
But I do think that there are ways, like to Sabrina's point, phase one doesn't necessarily have to take 3 to 9 months. We might even be able to do it in less than 3 months. As she said, maybe we can do it a maximum of 3 months. When we get into that process, we'll see. And absolutely, we need more than 1 day. 3 to 7 sounds actually low to me a little bit. But do they have to be all day things? I don't know. Like, is there a way we could potentially structure so they're half day or a few hours, and some are gonna be on the weekends and some are gonna be during the week? And we did this somewhat with the master plan where we had a lot of scoping sessions and they were at different times of day, and and I think to Sabrina's point, and in terms of identifying the stakeholders, that's more, if you think of it like a working group, who's gonna talk about, impacts on them and what they want, but those stakeholders are gonna be a vast cross-section of town, which I think we can come up with. It's gonna be merchants and residents and commuters and seniors and young families, and it's gonna be representatives from basically every walk of life in the community.
okay, Sabrina, so I guess you're good to go.
Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina.
All right,
Thanks,
thank
Sabrina.
you so much for doing all that work.
Thank you, Sabrina,
Thank
as
you.
always.
All right, so I think we're on board with that. Okay, the next thing on the agenda was discussing the FGEIS for the form-based code. So that the proposed resolution, again, I will reiterate, as a work session, we work on things, and the proposed initial draft, I know a lot of the board members didn't have time to really review, so we are going to table that until our
The
next
26th.
meeting on the 26th. And we'll move forward from there.
And do you wanna talk about the next proposed local law with the monetary threshold?
Do we have
What they
time?
worked on? Yeah, with monetary threshold, would,
Yeah, Tom's
So,
on.
okay, so the next,
do you wanna jump to Tom?
the next item actually originates with Tom. The board remembers not long ago that it adopted the stretch code with respect to the building code in Newcastle. And what Tom will explain is that there have been a number of occasions when the application of the stretch code requirements to small projects has created some pretty hard results for homeowners. So the idea that he's brought forward, and Chris can speak to this as well too, is the addition of a monetary threshold so that the smaller projects don't get trapped in requirements that actually make their small renovation, small project infeasible, because the cost of complying with a stretch code requirement could equal or exceed the cost of their entire project budget.
Right. Chris, do you wanna say anything?
Sure, so
quickly?
this is something, that came up a few months ago when we were first presented with frankly the need to modify our version of the stretch code to satisfy code council. And we had a discussion about it and things had certainly changed since when that was adopted in the fall by the prior town board. And I had raised some concerns about massive increases in cost, building products, supply chain issues, inflation generally. But ultimately, we all decided to adopt the modified stretch code, for a whole bunch of reasons, one of which was, long term it's the right thing to do. We also have 91 townhomes coming to Chappaqua Crossing, so we bought into that, but we did, hope that we would get updated information from NYSERDA, which I think to this day is still not come. And so in the course of those discussions, we talked about, what impact this might have on smaller projects, more modest renovations, and is it really necessary to increase costs and add that burden when, let's face it, the benefit is really nominal if any. And totally separate from that, Tom, has raised this concern, which is that if someone wants to put, air conditioning ducts in, for example, and that's a $15,000-$20,000 job, in order to comply with the stretch code, it could end up doubling the cost. And so, Tom, I'll turn it over to you for anecdotes in that regard. But to me, that raised a pretty compelling case for adding this, what I think is an extremely modest compromise to the existing stretch code.
Good evening, members of the board.
Hi, Tom.
One instance in particular that Kristen is talking about is the installation of air conditioning in existing attics. The stretch code requires that there be no ductwork or air handlers in unconditioned spaces. Since most attics are cold and unconditioned, this was a costly venture because you had to insulate the upper portion of the roof just under the roof shingle side, remove the insulation from down below in the floor before you could actually even start your AC project. This created, in some situations, a cost factor that was more than the installation of the AC system, and many residents declined moving forward and kept their older systems and just repaired them and not went forward with getting more energy efficient systems and better climate in the house. It also, magnified itself in small bathroom and kitchen problems where you had one or two windows and doors that needed to change. And the lead time is a little longer when you custom order a window or door as opposed to taking something that's in a warehouse somewhere. So this presented a, quandary for us, if you will, to, get residents to reduce their projects quicker or not at all. So that's why in conversation with Ed and Christian, we ventured down this path to give some relief for the smaller projects. Happy to take questions.
What I'm noticing from what you just related to us is that it's not just an increased, an unreasonably increased cost to the resident, but it's actually defeating the purpose of the stretch code because they're then deciding to maintain their current systems, which are less energy efficient than the new systems that they would put in.
That is correct.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, right, so they're thereby defeating the purpose of gaining more energy efficiency. So that's important, I think.
We actually go backwards, if you will.
So, for me, it was always a concern that this was gonna put an onerous burden on, certain residents, potentially with smaller scale projects. So I'm in favor of this. I think it's a modest amount. I think it will still, obviously, the stretch code will still need to be followed with new development, with larger projects. This is just, to me, a very small compromise that I think makes a lot of sense.
Tom, how many projects specifically were canceled or did not go through for air conditions, and how many projects that you're aware of specifically, I don't know the addresses, for people concerned about delays, because I'm less concerned about delays than I am about certainly the cost and keeping the less efficient system.
Best to my knowledge, there were two AC systems that were declined because of the increased cost of insulating the attics and the basements as well. That's unconditioned space in many houses. And there was one bathroom that they just gave up because they weren't being able to pull this all together. The intensity of trying to get product and contractors and costs just was too much for the residents. They revisit it later if they could. So there's only a handful, but we're pretty new to the spread code. You know, it's only been in place technically since January, and we have not had that many smaller projects. The bigger projects have very quickly jumped on requirement to save energy and money, and they move forward with them.
Have you heard the same issue with other building inspectors in other municipalities?
At the round table, this is quite apparent that we're all debating about it yet.
And Tom, just I in anticipation of this discussion, I also spoke to a few architects as well, and they're also seeing that projects are dying before they're even getting to planning departments and building departments, because the architects are telling them, you know, this is what it's gonna cost you because you need to comply with the stretch code, and it's just dying before it even gets to us, is what I've been told.
That may be a true statement because the prescriptive tab that the town of Newcastle chose really has the same insulation qualifications. It really is just a little bump in the right direction. The increased cost comes from material suppliers, sort of, you know, economics 101, supply and demand. It's harder to get products, so therefore there's increased cost of shipping now. So I don't know if that's entirely true that it shut all projects down.
No, I'm not, I'm talking about these small scale projects where it's gonna basically double a cost, not large construction.
We have lost quite a few architects and engineers that told me.
All right, any other questions?
I mean, Ed, the only thing obviously is whether making this modification would render us out of compliance, obviously, so that would be something we'd have to explore.
Right, so as a reminder, if this goes forward as a local law amendment, it'll be subject to review and approval by the code council, and they'll be looking at whether this makes our energy code any less restrictive than what the state requires. And we've already reached out to their staff and gotten some positive feedback. The preliminary view there is that this would be fine. It wouldn't make it less restrictive. It's just gonna change the threshold. So we're cautiously optimistic that we'll get a positive review from them.
And it's a relatively small amount.
Tom, question, Tom, are these projects, would they have to add new, for example, the air conditioning, add new insulation regardless, and it's just a higher grade insulation?
If they were talking about the AC projects under the current 2020 energy code, they would not have to do that. They would just have to do a duct pressure test.
Gotcha, so it's not just the higher grade insulation, it's in fact adding the insulation on top of it,
Correct.
figuratively and literally, okay.
All right, any other questions?
So
So we need to move this to a public hearing, right?
Yes.
Cause it's a legislative
so
change.
that would be on for the 26th, we would put it down, authorization to set a public hearing, Christina, and then from that point we
So
put
we
it
would-
on for
August.
September.
Oh, yeah, so we call for it on the 26th, right?
Yep.
And can't we set a public hearing today?
You could, there are no referrals on this, so
Oh, okay, we have the local law.
we could just go ahead and the board could just on a voice vote schedule the public hearing for July 26th. That's enough time,
I don't-
Christina, right, to
I can't imagine
to
it's
get
gonna
it
be a
Within the 10
long,
days.
5 days.
I can't imagine we're gonna get
Yeah,
volumes of people
Okay.
here.
We'll put on for the 26th,
okay, and we'll do resolution tonight.
alright, so we'll just add that to the resolutions for today.
Okay.
Hearing.
Right, next, do you wanna introduce the proposed property maintenance local law?
Sure. So this also comes from the concern Tom has raised and the board is aware of with respect to zombie properties and trying to affect trying to require the owner to correct conditions like that, and if that doesn't happen, then trying to give the town some better options than it currently has. So there is a state property maintenance code, and we just talked about how the stretch code for energy establishes certain minimum requirements that localities, towns cannot go beneath. Well, it's the same, the property maintenance code works the same way. So that's there are standards in that state code with respect to things like grass getting over 10 inches and that could be that is a violation. Derelict cars, there's a lot of content that's already in the state property maintenance code. And some municipalities have in their own local codes that same content and those same prescriptions. Newcastle actually doesn't have anything on the books with respect to property maintenance and it relies on the state code. So after conferring with Tom, we looked at some other municipalities like Bedford and North Castle, and our neighbors tend to have something on their books with respect to property maintenance. So we took couple of the examples and used that to draft something for the board's consideration. I would say that we were over-inclusive in this initial draft in terms of itemizing some of the things that would be potential violations. That said, those same things are already in the state property maintenance code. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. The biggest change in the draft legislation is the enforcement tool with respect to having a notice and opportunity process for owners who are not dealing with a zombie property situation for whatever reason, allowing the town as a last resort to go in and do maintenance and then charge back the owner in the form of a lien on the property, again as a last resort. So that's what's before you. I'll turn it over to Tom or Chris if they want to speak to this.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think looking at this and seeing it for the first time in the agenda, our discussions in the past were on zombie properties, which I think is a completely appropriate thing for us to try to address. And I think having the mechanism in here of providing teeth, i.e. to add that penalty to the tax bill and allowing us to levy the property versus say an absentee owner who lives in Florida and you could fine them all day long but you're never going to collect, to me is critical. I guess you hit the nail on the head from my perspective, Ed, which is the breadth of this. I think it rightly, even if it exists in New York law in some form or other, I think we could get to the same place by essentially bootstrapping New York law, which applies today, right? In other words, Tom's, office right now could enforce violations of the New York Property Maintenance Code. And so to me, I think the better approach would be to simply say, we adhere to New York State Property Maintenance Code and we're adding a remedy provision effectively, that would allow us to pursue tax liens and add that to the tax bill, as opposed to adding this broad itemized list, which for most of our residents, they've just never seen that before. I think it raises all sorts of other questions. That's my take on it.
So again, this is the first time any of us are seeing this. I just wanna clarify, so this isn't meant to encompass you decide to engage in no mow May, for instance, and you're not mowing your lawn for a month. you're not gonna get fined. Or there is a field mouse that's running through your property, you're not getting fined. We all have mice around. This is meant to really get to when it's becoming an issue, either because it's unsafe or it's a significant eyesore in the neighborhood, or it's something that really needs to be dealt with and is not being dealt with. Right? That's what it's supposed to get to and give us the remedy to be able to do that if we need to. If there's a home that nobody's living in and there are significant harmful issues and we can't get anybody to remedy that, this gives us the ability to remedy that and charge that back to the property owner on their tax bill.
That's right, and it's completely the board's prerogative in terms of how much additional content it wants to build into this, what would be a new chapter in the town code. Again, looking at other municipalities like Bedford, Mount Kisco, North Castle, Mount Pleasant, to some extent or another, they have that additional content, but it's already in the state property maintenance code, so whether you want to repeat or add, make it stricter or add, that's totally within the board's prerogative.
I mean, I don't mind, I hear what you say, I don't mind listing a few of those things, saying, to Chris's point, that it's subject to the, we're gonna enforce the New York State code, but which includes but is not limited to, and a few things that are, that we see as significant hazards or safety issues that we wanna make sure our residents front and center, if they're looking at our codes, see that this is something you need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think there's just a couple of, just for example, a couple of distinctions that, and I get that, Bedford and other towns have the more detailed list of prescribed conditions, but like, for example, if you look at the state code under rodent harborage, it's kept, structures and exterior property shall be kept free from rodent harborage and infestation. Whereas the draft says presence of vermin, rodent harborage, or infestation. And the state code says weeds, all developed areas of a premise shall be maintained free from weeds in excess of 10 inches, noxious weeds shall be prohibited, and the draft says overgrown conditions resulting from overgrown grass or vegetation on established lawns. So things like that, I think, to me, I don't personally see the benefit of making those changes. I think if New York State requires it, then obviously we're bound by that. So that would be my preference.
Yeah, it sounds to me like we've taken New York State law and made it overly broad and vague to the point that, the definitions would be a challenge here, and you'd have a situation that is really, in a lot of cases, in the eye of the beholder. And then you would have to ask, well, who is appointed to determine whether something is unsightly, or given that you have these very broad terms. So I like the solution of simply hearkening back to state law and focusing on enforcement, rather than trying to recreate the wheel and causing a lot of confusion and concern among our residents about what they would be charged with.
But if we include any of that description, I think it should match what's in the New York State code.
I think it's a real enforcement issue because, when I was town prosecutor and as well as the current prosecutors, these matters have been pursued for people who have not maintained their property, and sometimes we'd have them back and back and back as repeat offenders. The fear is you don't want selective enforcement. I know that's a big issue. We don't want to make sure we're only picking and choosing and only pursuing some properties. So it needs to be clear in terms of zombie properties. I don't know if you can differentiate between others where people are residing. And then set aside no mow May. I admittedly am not a participant in it, but there are some people who have really tall grass on their property that I may not like. How are they protected? I may not want to have all the natural, as much as I like certain things natural, but I may not want that everywhere, and that's my neighbor and I don't like it, but do they not have a right to do that? Would we then say, because you can't be selective, well, this law is on the books, you can't have that, but we'll turn a blind eye because you like it?
If you
But it's
distinguish.
New York State law.
No, if you distinguish between New York State law, which covers weeds, and what we drafted, which I think is a little broader, right? Someone could,
By the way, let me jump into we drafted, I like how
Pardon me?
we
Yeah.
and we drafted,
we drafted.
Good. We drafted.
I think that's a big distinction. Someone who has a meadow, for example, on their front lawn, who has wildflowers or other things, I mean, I don't think any interpretation of that being noxious weeds, you would be allowed to do that.
I don't know what the definition is of noxious weeds, for
There's
example.
actually a definition in the maintenance code with respect to weeds, and it's something that we're looking at because we're aware that folks we're aware of the no mow may and pollinator gardens, and we're
Right.
taking a look at the state code in terms of its definitions and trying to potentially carve out some space where folks can do those things and not be concerned that they are in violation. But I think we should.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say that this discussion is very similar to the one that Tom and Chris and I had in terms of the content in the draft. And I think it's important the board hears from Tom as well, because he's the guy that's going to be. He had the same concerns, but the upshot of it was we wanted the board to at least see all of the content and then have the exercise or discussion about dialing it back and landing at the right mix, if you will, as opposed to giving you the skinny version and not.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
My one question I have is, would we be able to be more lenient than state law?
No.
I doubt that,
No,
but
that's
just in case state law would impact
No.
wildflower or gardens that are not as standard as we're used to seeing.
no. The answer is no. We're trying to work within that framework.
And how does it work,
Tom?
I'm sorry, one other question, how does it work with a project, for example, a project's been going on for a long time for a building and as they're building the project, the property isn't maintained, but it's going to be a constructive, beautiful project in the end, but we've seen properties that have taken a long time to get them done. What's the enforcement mechanism, say, while you're doing that building that property out, you have to do, keep it mowed, you have to put up those gutters, you can't have them hanging, I mean, is that, would we rely on this? So it's not just the zombie properties, it's the properties that are.
Yeah, I think we've had, let Tom speak to that. I think we've had some success on that, but I'll let him answer.
Members of the board, you touched on all good points. Remember, this is another tool for our toolbox. We have a problem with enforcement. We can send these owners to the courts, but if they're out of state and don't appear, we get a dead end. There's nothing that we can do to appease the neighbors, try to cut the grass. The town can't send town forces for local and private entities. So this would be a tool where the town could hire a subcontractor to go do that work, and it would be a regulatory nature where we would go through, like Ed said earlier, certain processes to get to the provision where I would have to enlist a subcontractor through a vetting system, I would guess, from the town, have them go out and do a cleanup of a property, and the causes are vast while we're there. When we have zombie properties, I can write endless letters to the Deutsche Bank and never hear back, never get any kind of resolution. But the neighbors live next to these properties, and they call sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, but they call. And they're just looking for the grass to be cut, the property to be maintained as they maintain theirs. So if we could use this tool to where we could charge the lien back in taxes, then these properties could be put on maintenance plans once they've been approved by the town board as being a specific property of concern. Then the neighbors will have say a calendar year of no concern, something's going on. And I had also spoken with Ed, it would be nice if we could post a sign during the process saying this, is under a property maintenance review of the town board to alleviate the neighbors calling endlessly. And I don't know what to tell them anymore. We're working on it, They don't buy that anymore. They're too smart. I have too much respect for them. And, I'm telling them that we're at the end of the rope and there's not much more we can do. This has been valuable for other towns and they get the problem solved. we have over 24 residencies in our town that this will fit the bill. Some are occupied by owners, some are vacant. The vacant ones, in my opinion, are very easy. So if the
Or very what, I'm sorry.
owners are not going to take care of it.
And you know, Tom, to me, it's not even so much, you know, mowing the lawn, for instance, it's more, I've seen issues where there are vacant properties and they have cars stuck up on blocks and broken glass all over the place. That's something that actually poses a danger, and we can't reach people to clean that up. We should be able to clean that up and bill that back to the property owner on their tax bill.
That's what I'm asking for, that the building department has the right to bring them in front of the town board to make that decision. That the town says, yes, we as a collective unit need to clean up this specific problem.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we build in the remedy provision and we solve the problem.
Yeah, I think,
Bootstrap New York law and build in a, you know, a very sort of toothy remedy provision, I think we would solve.
One last question as to this, there's a property, without being specific, that has probably 10 acres.
Yep.
And it's way overgrown, and there's some wetlands and things like that. But a lot of it is set back from the road. So there may be some adjacent neighbors, but a lot of it is set back from the road. Would the town then enforce, and I don't think there's anyone, I know there's no one lived there actually for a decade at least. So would the town then would go and mow that lawn even that's not adjacent to someone else's property and then ultimately have a lien on it? Just thinking from a practical perspective, it would be our burden to do that when
Yeah,
it's not on someone's lawn, pardon me, it's not adjacent to a road, it's not adjacent to a private residence, so it's not that visible nuisance.
You know, that's an interesting question, Jeremy. I'm aware of the property that you're talking about. And yeah, with properties, number one, not all 10 acres are meadow.
Correct, but there's still plenty of
So
acres.
there's a significant rocky outcropping, but you do have neighbors and neighbors with more
Yes.
modest properties that right back up to it.
So what would we
and
do?
so-
I just
Yeah, Tom,
just-
it's an interesting question.
just on the
Yeah.
law though, I don't understand this to mean that we have an obligation to do anything. We just now have an ability to enforce the collection of the penalties because up to now, we don't have an obligation to go on.
No, I'm not saying that, but so when you're dealing with a property that's 10 acres and the whole thing is overgrown, are you going in and you mowing all 10 acres?
I just said we don't have to, but now we can
Right,
we can
but-
penalize the owner and put it on their taxes.
I understand, but so
But it
what are the
doesn't-
limits that you
I don't know what you mean by that. If someone continues to violate,
If I may,
yeah, please.
Thank you.
I think you're going into the undeveloped areas of the property. We're really looking at the surroundings of the dwelling that would have been manicured, not the entirety of a property. We're not looking to make everything park-like. We're just looking to clean the areas directly around a house, a dwelling, or a structure that will allow for a pleasing presence. We can't start cutting fields and mowing. This will be a daunting, endless task, in my opinion.
Even the fine levy though, that's the same question though, even if we're not going to do it, do we fine them for those acres that are not adjacent to the home? So maybe it just needs to be tightened up for that purpose to define what is the responsibility of the homeowner to maintain.
I mean,
Should they
it
not?
Well,
it
but
sounds
just-
like what you're saying is that we would be addressing what's visible
Right,
to
from where?
neighbors or
Right.
from the street,
So that's
I
right, so
suppose.
that
Just to be clear, if we do nothing, right now, New York State Property Maintenance Code empowers Tom to fine people.
Right.
Okay, so if all we do is to say, and when we fine people, instead of just sending them a fine to Virginia or Florida and never collecting, now we have the ability to say, it's part of your tax bill. So if we do nothing else, that's really, to me, I would think, from Tom's perspective, a huge advantage and gives Tom the power to do that. I don't know why we even need to debate where the property is set off. It's basically saying, let's take New York law and give us the ability under Newcastle law to enforce it via the property tax mechanism.
But Chris, the reason we're asking is
Yes.
because now we're going to be enforcing it. So
No,
it's a question of
but I
understanding
think
how
Tom is-
enforcement is going to work.
Right, but I think Tom is trying to enforce it and we're just saying
Right,
we
but-
can never collect and therefore we never get action from the owner.
No, but in enforcing it and in putting something as part of the tax levy, we're trying to figure out what exactly will be addressed. Is it only the visible portions, or do we now have to go into, the interior of the property which is not visible? So that, I think that's the question.
Yeah,
Right,
does the
but I-
statute set that
Yeah,
out?
but I guess the question then is, Tom, what do you do now under existing New York state law?
Under New York state law, we're issuing violations and then issuing appearance tickets with getting no response. At that point, they sit idle and have to grasp at whatever problem is staying here year after year. It's been a number of years with no, responsibility to the property.
No, I think,
Vicky
Tom,
made
the
one-
question is, what are you issuing violations for? Is it just for the area right around the home? Is it for, fields in the back? If that's overgrown, what are you issuing the violations for?
A typical violation that we get is the grass is not being cut, there's debris, things, vehicles on the property, and everyone's referring to adjacent to the dwelling. They're not looking at fields, wetlands. Wetlands have their own special rules. We have to, follow those guidelines. This is more specific to there's a dwelling. There's a problem with the dwelling is unkept.
Well, when you say adjacent to the dwelling, I guess I'm trying to be specific. Let's say you have a house that's set way back that you can't see from the road, but then you have an acre that you can see from the road that is unsightly. So that's not really adjacent to the dwelling, it's simply visible from either the road or from a neighboring house.
Okay,
So-
I can interpret that. We have a lot of properties in Chappaqua and Millwood that they have a long driveway and they have woods or met fields to get to their property that they do not take care of. You have wetlands that never get taken care of. So this has been always focused on the entranceway into the building for life safety and emergency personnel, and the areas directly adjacent to the buildings and the buildings themselves.
Alright, so I think it sounds like the board's relatively in favor of this. We wanna tighten this up, refer it to the New York State code. And then I wouldn't mind taking one or two things out of that code to specify in our code, including but not limited to, but whatever we do should track exactly the language of the New York State code.
So we'll make the revisions and bring back another version for the board to workshop at a future meeting.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Maybe the
Thank you,
20th.
Tom.
very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Tom.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the thought is that, I guess if we do that by the 26th, then we can put it on for a public hearing for the following meeting for August or September.
Will we need referrals?
No, it's not a zoning amendment.
No, okay, fine. So that's the question, so would we be able to do it on the 9th of August? Cause if we're doing it on the 26th, our meeting after that is the 9th.
Christine, that's enough
No.
time?
1, 2, 3, yep.
Okay, so we'll set the public hearing on the 26th
For the 9th.
for August 9th.
Okay,
Great. There we go.
alright, do you wanna walk us through what's
Yeah,
left?
I'll just walk you through the administrative items. We've got payment of claims, adoption of the monthly reports. We've got authorization to attend conferences for police. We're sending 3 of our juvenile officers, officers who deal with juveniles, just to clarify on that. For a price not to exceed $2,316. Next is authorization to obtain bids. This is for after-school programs that the rec department runs. So they run buses from the Chappaqua Central School District schools to whatever art center, things like that. Next is authorization to enter into engineering on-call services agreements with Hazen and Sawyer. One of the things that the unexpected demise of our generator at the Millwood Water Treatment Plant showed us was that we needed emergency on-call engineering services, so that when an emergency arose, we had an engineer call in right at that moment and help us out. So we're hoping that we will never need them, but we'd like to get them. Next is authorization to retain, this is an annual service agreement for the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. We're required to calibrate all of the equipment on the property, in Millwood Water Treatment Plant, so that's by Hatch Company.
Do we go out, just a question, and get RFPs to rebid any of these?
Not for this sort of thing because it's proprietary, so there's only a few companies that actually deal with it and it's their specific.
But do we ever see if those few companies, if anyone wants to offer us a better rate?
I don't think that, yeah, I'll find out what the deal is. I'm almost certain that these are proprietary and that yeah, I'll find out. Next is a resolution in support of, this is the Con Ed's electric vehicle charging station. This is the Make Ready program. This allows us to get reimbursement from Con Ed for the infrastructure for the new electric chargers. We've got a resolution authorizing acceptance of a cash bond agreement for 73 Cowden Lane. We're requesting permission to update our fee schedule for refuse and recycling. Unfortunately, we're being charged for both the pickup of air conditioners and dehumidifiers now, in addition to upping the prices for the pickup of refrigerators. So those prices are gonna go from $20 to $30 for a refrigerator, and the air conditioning is now gonna be $20 as well as a dehumidifier. And that just reflects the prices that we're charged, that we incur. Next is authorization to purchase a lift. A new lift for a price not to exceed $20,282. It's off a state contract, but we do like to alert the board as to large purchases. Speaking of large purchases, next is authorization to purchase paving services. So this is going to be a purchase order in the amount of $1.39 million. We're asking for $200,000 over the original paving budget, which we do have surplus for. So we can get our streets paved this year. And as a follow-up to that, we had received a petition from the residents of Hates Cross Road asking us not to pave it with asphalt, but rather to oil and chip it. Bart went out to try to secure oil and chip services for this year, and unfortunately we're unable to get them. So we're just updating the board, and we'll update the neighbors that we will go out first thing next year and try to get oil and chip services, paving services. For Hates Cross, we're also hoping that there may be a couple of other roads that we can do as well with oil and chip, and so we may be able to get a contractor if we're able to offer them more than just one street, even though Hates Cross is pretty substantial.
But oil and chip doesn't last as long.
It is a certain finish that one of the major complaints.
Crumbles.
Yeah, one of the major complaints about newly paved roads is the speed. And oil and chip sort of, helps retain the little bit more of a country lane-ish sort of deal. It's not quite a
They don't
gravel
want it as a
road.
cross street.
Yeah, just for full transparency, I live on Hates Cross, so I'm very familiar with that, and if that street is paved very smoothly, people do use that as a cross street.
It's unbelievable.
And it's a very, in some places it's very narrow, and the curves are very blind curves, and it's quite dangerous, and people do go very fast. So although the cut and chip doesn't last very long, the road ends up being very bumpy, but that's how the residents want it because it's simply safer.
And did every resident sign off on that?
I believe it did.
Okay.
That's all I have. Are there any questions on the administrative items?
Thank you.
Move on
Can
to-
we just, with the Hates Cross, I'm sorry to go back to that again, we get numerous complaints about people needing their roads paved. So I just wanna make sure that they are aware that they're still gonna be on a regular schedule, they don't get moved up because they're asking for a surface that's less durable. You know what I mean? If you need to pave a road, let's say every 10 years, but this needs to be repaved every 6 years, let's say, or 5 years. I just wanna make sure residents are aware that we're not repaving them every 6 years necessarily, they're still on the schedule, God bless you, with the rest of the,
Yeah,
you know, there are other streets that may
oil chip
come above them.
is not an equivalent expenditure as asphalt.
No, but it's also time.
I can't make that
No,
determination.
I just wanna make sure they're aware that, you know,
Yeah,
this
I
is
don't-
not going to last as long and they're
I don't-
okay with that.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know anything about oil and chip as far as paving, as far as what lasts and what doesn't last, or the duration of it. I don't remember the last time Hates Cross was done. Do you have any recollection?
No, I don't have a
Maybe
problem
10
with that,
years-
I
10
just
years
know
ago
my
or
street,
something.
for instance, used to be the oil and chip and it disintegrated pretty quickly. So I just want residents to know if you're asking for this, that's fine, we can accommodate you, but we're not necessarily coming back in 4 years.
Yeah, somehow I've
fix it.
never heard people say, gee, we really want this street repaved, other than having huge potholes like any other street and wanting the potholes to be
Right.
repaired, which I think happens, but
Right. So if you could just let whoever did this, just let
I don't wanna
let the
speak for it
residents
just because
know.
I live there.
Okay,
I'm adjourning for.
alright, is that it for the work session? Okay, so can I have a motion to adjourn the work session
And move into
and open the town board meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, I was gonna do that as two separate resolutions, but that's fine. Alright, welcome everybody to the town board meeting of Tuesday, July 12th, 2022. We are going to open this, Jill, do you have any announcements? Or Christina?
Yeah, actually just two quick things, just that the 27th
27?
is cleanup day. So town hall will be closed to the public that day, staff will be in, we are required under New York State records to take and purge our records every year. We have a maintenance schedule, a retention schedule for all of our different records and stuff like that, so the state requires us to do this, so we won't be answering our phones, we will be at work, you know, you wanna come help, you know, bring a t-shirt, favorite band, pair of jeans, a dust mask, and yeah, help in with us. Just our housekeeping, our schedule is our next meeting is the 26th, that's the last meeting in July, and then at this point we have only one meeting in August, and that's the 9th.
And there's the primary on the 23rd. No, it's just saying there's a primary on the 23rd.
Of
That's it, of August.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Alright, any other announcements? Okay, I'm gonna waive most of my supervisor's report and everyone can just read the town newsletter. The only thing I wanna say is if you don't get the town newsletter, please make sure to subscribe to it. You can go on our website, mynewcastle.org, under Stay Connected, and there's a link to sign up for the e-newsletter. It contains important information that you can't find necessarily on Facebook. Alright, our community corner, I have a few birthdays. The first is happy 14th birthday, I don't think I said these yet. Happy 14th birthday to Lila Tainsky. Happy 4th birthday to Killian Kurtikar. Yay, happy 2nd birthday to Teddy Branco. And your husband and the town, Alex Marmon, also wish you a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Those have not been reported yet. A couple others were in the newsletters, but I didn't get to publicly announce them. So I just wanna say a happy birthday to Katie and Pat Potes. Happy birthday to Larry Hochberg. Happy 6th birthday to Eli Hochberg. Happy 8th birthday to Arav Jangji, and happy 21st birthday to Dana Bikey. So please make sure to look for all of the community's best wishes to you on the electronic sign across from the train station.
Happy birthday, everybody.
Happy birthday and anniversary, and as always, feel free to send us anything at communitycorner@mynewcastle.org, and we will make sure to announce your special event. Anything else from the town administrator's report, Jill? All right, so then we are going to move right to public comment, new business. Anybody in the peanut gallery here have public comment or new business?
Gotta stand up after a lengthy meeting, it's good to stand up. I just wanted to make a request. There is one scheduled lawn pickup during the entire month of July.
Did you say lawn pickup?
Lawn pickup,
Okay.
lawn waste. And that's kind of onerous. Now, I know the way the schedule worked, there was a pickup at the last week in June, but there isn't going to, for example, next week is in our particular district the only place to do it. I'm already up to 4 or 5 bags. And
What's in your bags?
yard waste.
Personal
It's
question,
supposed
I
to
guess.
be-
Sorry, just
No bodies, I would put the bodies go to a separate location and I don't ask the town to
yeah,
take
we
care
have
of
to
it.
pay extra for those.
No, that's fine, it's all good. No, this is loose and debris, but you were talking about people that not mow their lawn and create eyesores in an earlier discussion. This is just the normal maintenance things, but what I'm gonna request, please, is that through the month of July, it's the summer, keep on with the every other week schedule for yard waste pickup. There's probably a perception, well, you're not picking up leaves, that's it. But trees get bigger, things happen, and so if the town would consider in the next schedule for 2023, please add it every other week throughout the year. Thank you very much.
Alright, we can look into that. Thanks, John. Anyone online have any public comment? You can raise your digital hand.
No one has their hand raised at this time.
Alright. So I'm gonna give it 10 more seconds and then we will move on. Okay, so now we're moving on to our public hearings. We right now are considering a local law to amend chapter 60, section 210 and section 410, subsection D of the Code of the Town of Newcastle concerning sign regulations. Can I have a motion to open that public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ed, do you wanna brief us on that one more time?
This version of the local law includes the language that the board requested with respect to immediately preceding the event or activity with respect to erecting a temporary sign. Otherwise, the draft is substantively the same as the prior version. The board's received responses from the Newcastle Planning Board and the Westchester County Planning Board. Neither had substantive comments on the proposed legislation.
And our planning board, I think, said they were in favor of it.
They were in favor of it, they didn't propose any, make any suggestions in terms of revisions.
Okay, so why don't we open that to public comment then? Does anyone here have any public comment on this proposed local law? We can write at you. Okay, how about anyone online?
None of the attendees have their hand raised at this time.
Did you say none or one?
None.
None, okay. All right, I'm talking slowly to give anyone a chance. Hearing no public comments, can I have a motion to, and by the way, we've now had this open, I think this is our 3rd or 4th public hearing on this. So I would propose that we close the public hearing at this point. It's been open for public comments and written comments. I think we were only really waiting on hearing from the Westchester County and our town planning boards, which we now have, and they've had no objections. So can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I will move to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alright, so now I guess we're moving to our resolutions unless there's anything else, Jill. Okay, so before we get to the consent agenda items, was there anything that anyone wanted to remove from those consent agenda items? Alright, so who wants to take those? Chris, you wanna
I'll
start?
start. I move to adopt the consent agenda as submitted, consisting of the following. Adoption of monthly reports, June 2022. Authorization to attend conference, please. Authorization to obtain bids for the 2022-23 school year bus contract, recreation. Authorization to enter into an engineering on-call services agreement with Hazen and Sawyer DPC. Authorization to retain annual service agreement for the Millwood Water Treatment Plant for on-site calibration and factory recommended maintenance, Hack Company. Resolution in support of the town of Newcastle's contract execution for electric vehicle charging infrastructure cost reimbursement from Consolidated Edison's Make Ready program train station. Resolution authorizing acceptance of cash bond agreement 73 Cowden Lane. Authorization to update fee schedule, refuse and recycling. Authorization to purchase vehicle lift for the Department of Public Works Mechanics Unit, and authorization to purchase paving services.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll do one more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Payment of claims, checks dated July 13, 2022. I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $417,908.10 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detail voucher detail report, both dated July 11, 2022. Checks will be cut and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, July 13, 2022.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Why don't you do one more, finish the
Sure.
page.
Authorization to promote parks. I move to authorize the promotion of Manuel Cumbe to the position of Parks Assistant Foreman within the Recreation and Parks Department at the annual salary of $73,075.53 effective July 25, 2022.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Christie, you wanna go?
Okay. I move to authorize the hiring of the following individuals to the position of recreation attendant 0270-05 within the Recreation and Parks Department to serve as 2022 camp counselors at the corresponding rates as described in the resolutions agenda below effective July 5th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize the reappointment and appointment of the following members to the Sustainability Advisory Board at the terms as the terms indicated below effective August 1, 2022. The reappointment for a term of 2 years, Maxine Margot Rubin, Kathy Schreiber, Alicia Malloy, Rick Stein, Zachary Walk. And Jennifer Meebs Flag. An appointment for the term of 1 year, Lexi Marshall, who will be a student member.
And just to amend that to Jennifer Mead Flags will be a co-chair of that committee.
And Jennifer Meeb, and we appoint Jennifer Meebs Flag to be a co-chair for a term of 2 years. Is that right?
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the reappointment of Kenneth Cooper as chairman of the zoning board of appeals for a term of 5 years effective retroactively to January 1st of this year to December 31st, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think we had a
And I
addition-
think we've setting the public hearing, correct?
Right, it came around.
there's an
We have
email.
an email,
Just use.
I have it if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
I move to authorize the reappointment and appointment of the following members to the, oh,
No,
no,
you're ready.
sorry. I was not reading ahead.
Oh, no.
I move to set a public hearing on a local law to amend chapter 62, section 2 of the town code of the town of Newcastle to establish a monetary threshold for the Newcastle Energy Code for July 26, 2022 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as practicable at the Newcastle Town Hall Assembly Room.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Alright, anything else? No? Okay, well, can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alright, thank you, happy 2 weeks again, we're meeting again in 2 weeks. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you guys.
To them, and then they
Contemporaneously
schedule
with
a
us.
public meeting and they
Wow, that was shorter than I thought it was gonna be.
Really good.
I know, and then it got struck.
Well, I know, but I mean, we adopt first.